I don't feel like being born seemed to express from his mother guts the completely formed baby, who a few minutes later was already sticking out his head out of the maternal placenta. After the pushing and contractions of his progenitor's own birth process, which ended up expelling the complete creature out of the uterus, in order to go from a dark and watery environment to the illuminated outdoors dryness of the precarious site specially prepared by the midwife. Much larger in size than the tiny cloister in which the fetus had lived for 9 months before starting the extrauterine brand new life, and starting a hazardous tour through the avenues of an extraordinary starting life filled with unexpected events and dangers. He was not even being laid down in the handmade crib when a golden eagle suddenly entered the birthplace, and with his talons captured the neonate. Sandra, the mother, let out a disbelief and pain scream louder than the cries of birth. The imposing bird flew through the high mountain peaks and placed the kid with the crib in a small cave inhabited by a hermit, who managed to see in amazement how the animal took flight from his cave when he was getting close to his dwelling. After an arduous hunting and wild fruit harvesting day, what a scare the man got when he found out a crib being shaken by the unceasing slapping and uncontainable cry of the newborn, whom the solitary man immediately took in his arms used to carry logs and wild animals, and quickly ran out with the little one downhill through the rocky path non-stopping, until he reached the rustic home of a recently given birth young woman who breastfed her girl. It didn't take the hermit too long to convince the young woman to share her breastfeeding with the upstart baby, with only one condition: the man should supply the needs of water, firewood, and food for the young woman in exchange for the valuable milk and childcare. The man then took the road back to his cave to gather the food and logs that he was going to share with the girl, according to the agreement. That way, the lonely individual regularly took water from a spring near the girl's shack, firewood and food for the next year every third day, until he died due to a poisonous viper. Little after the hermit man's death, the girl's father unexpectedly arrived to the house of the young woman, who he hadn't seen since he left her when the girl was 1 month old. When he entered the shack, he came across a girl and a boy, which costing him an irrational jealousy attack. Without taking into account the visible obviousness that the boy and his daughter were the same age, reasoned more why the boy couldn't be hers. He knocked the young woman down with a punch, brusquely took the boy, and furiously left carrying the boy in his arms. He rode his horse and took it to a town located on a mountain's foothill. He put the creature into a potato sack and left him outside of a church. Just as it happened to the French encyclopedist d'Alembert, in the 18th century without being noticed. Sandra had gotten a deep sadness physiognomy since the tragic day in which she lost her baby. 2 years before she had lost her first baby when it was born, and she was really hopeful when she knew about her pregnancy. Raul, her husband, swore to her that he couldn't stop until he were to find his only son. But despite going around in a tenacious and unsuccessful search for months, he was convinced that the eagle must have devoured him. He didn't believe at first what an old merchant with a child in his arms said when assuring that the boy he carried was Raul's. He argued that the boy seemed to be 1 year old, he didn't have parents or tutors that claimed him. He explained to him that a young man found the infant in a potato sack out of the neighboring town's church, and as it was known in the town that he had been looking for the boy commissioned by Raul. The young man that found it immediately looked for him and sold it to him for 100 pesos. Skeptical, but slightly hopeful, based more on wishful thinking rather than conviction, accepted to pay 300 pesos that the American asked for the child and took it to Sandra. When she saw it, she didn't hesitate to welcome it with the ineffable joy with which a mother meets again with a missing child. She hugged him and filled him up with kisses in front of the disconcerting look of her husband, who couldn't understand his wife's reaction, as if she were convinced that it was her boy. Raul couldn't stop looking at the boy. The more he observed, the more he doubted the boy was his son, verifying that he didn't look like him at all. Both Raul and Sandra were dark-skinned with small oval black eyes, while the boy was quite fair-skinned and his round big blue eyes stood out. After thinking about it calmly, Raul convinced himself that the boy couldn't be his son, and he remembered the white guy with similar eyes to the boy who used to sell goods in the town. Although he hadn't seen him around that place for about 1.5 years. Without telling his wife, he took off looking for the man. During the journey, he remembered that just before his wife got pregnant, he used to travel frequently carrying merchandise to several towns, some of them quite far, which sometimes forced him to spend the night out. After riding his horse for a couple of hours and following the directions of different informers, he finally arrived at a small village where he would find the wanted man. It didn't take him long to find the location of Jan, as he was named. He knocked the door of the presumed house. A beautiful lady opened the gate. She denied that Jan lived there. But from inside the house, Jan's hoarsely English accented voice was heard, asking the lady, who was it? Which forced her to tell him that someone was looking for him. Let him come in, shouted Jan. Raul went straight to the point. My wife is dark-skinned just as me. None of her ancestors, nor mine, were blonde, nor had light-colored eyes. About 1 year ago, my wife gave birth to a blonde, blue-eyed baby. I remember seeing you hovering around near my house before my wife got pregnant. I didn't see any other man with those characteristics in San Gabriel, where I live. So I come to kill you to restore my dignity. I don't know what are you talking about. I don't know who you are, nor do I know your wife, Jon assured. Then Raoul gripped his gun to kill Jon. But in that instant, the young lady struck him with such a hard hit on the head with axe, and Raoul fell dead. Right now, you will take me to Saint Gabriel to see that boy, you damn traitor. That's the only reason why I saved your life. I want to check out whether that chap's allegations are true. The lady yelled at him with a furious voice. Jon had no choice but to take her. They had recently got married and didn't want to lose her. They buried the body in the hill and rode on Jon's horse to Saint Gabriel. In such a small town, it wasn't hard for them to find Sandra's house. The first informer knew how to tell them where the woman with the blonde baby lived. After all, it was the only baby with those characteristics. You stay here, categorically ordered the lady to her husband. She wanted to be the one to find out directly and firsthand. Moreover, she didn't want Raoul's wife to see Jon. She wanted to question her first. It wasn't needed. Sandra opened the gate with the boy in her arms. She didn't imagine that her husband's murderer was the one knocking her door. The young lady confirmed that the boy was blonde, and indeed, Sandra was dark-skinned. Sandra asked what she needed. And the young lady told her she wanted to ask some questions. The house owner let her in, and once inside, she could see a blond young man wearing an undershirt, shorts and sandals, totally familiarized with the house. Sandra introduced him as her husband. In light of that, the young lady was sure that her husband had nothing to do with all that mess, and she decided to put it as if everything had been a misunderstanding. She apologized and left the house. Jon was outside waiting for her calmly. While they rode the horse to get back home, the lovers inside the house resumed their intense erotic day. After leaving the sleepy blonde boy in the crib to sleep. In the distance, the baby could spot a golden eagle through the window, in full ascending flight, before closing his little eyes.